And so to say it and to talk about it was so shameful and so shocking, even to me, much less to my wife, to my children, to the congregation, to the people that I loved so dearly.
For years, Ted Haggard stood among America's most powerful pastors, preaching morality, faith, and family to millions, while building an empire that seemed untouchable. Then, one explosive revelation brought everything crashing down almost overnight. What followed wasn't just a scandal, it was a chain of secrets, betrayals, and consequences that kept growing darker with every passing year. And by the time the final chapter unfolded, there was no way back. The briefcase in the living room. In July of 2022, the Denver Gazette published an investigation that should have been the final nail in Ted Haggard's coffin. Reverend Kirk Sethman, a minister who had been ordained by Haggard himself at St. James Church in Colorado Springs, came forward with evidence that had been buried for nearly a decade. Two young men, one of whom was a minor when the alleged incidents took place in 2019, claimed on a recorded tape that Haggard had touched them inappropriately on multiple occasions at the church and during off-site activities. They described Haggard taking them and other young men four-wheeling without shirts, and said the physical contact went far beyond what anyone would call an acceptable shoulder squeeze. But that tape was not even the most disturbing part of what Sethman brought to the Gazette. He described a confrontation that happened back in the spring of 2012, less than 2 years after Haggard launched St. James Church as his grand second act. Haggard had been personally counseling a young male church member who was fighting to recover from addiction. And during those counseling sessions, Haggard allegedly asked that young man, a person who trusted him with his sobriety and his life, to buy substances for him. When Sethman found out, he enlisted a church member who was a medical doctor, and together they confronted Haggard at Sethman's home. According to Sethman, Haggard admitted to having the meth and told them he was planning to use it to celebrate his upcoming birthday. He then asked the two men to come to his house and help him remove the substance so he would not be tempted. When they arrived, Haggard pulled out a briefcase and handed it over. Inside, Sethman said he found a bag of methamphetamine with very little remaining, a well-used glass meth pipe, multiple adult toys, a DVD with two young males on the cover, and a credit card with Ted Haggard's name printed right on it. Haggard asked both men to conceal the matter and promised he would be accountable to them going forward. They agreed. And for years, nothing happened. The church board did not act. Nobody called authorities. Nobody removed him from leadership. The congregation had absolutely no idea what their pastor was carrying in his luggage. By 2022, St. James Church had hemorrhaged so many members that Haggard sold the building for $1.95 million and moved services into his own living room, renaming the shrinking group the Storyhouse Church. To understand how a man ends up handing a briefcase full of meth and adult toys to his own church staff, you need to understand just how high Ted Haggard climbed before the fall. Because the height of this fall is what makes the wreckage so enormous. The man who had everything. Haggard founded New Life Church in 1984 with 22 people meeting in the basement of his Colorado Springs home. Within 2 decades, that basement Bible study grew into a $60 million campus with 14,000 members streaming through the doors every Sunday. Haggard was not your standard stiff-suited televangelist reading from a teleprompter. People who knew him described someone genuinely magnetic, wickedly funny, and shockingly open about personal struggles. Journalist Lee Grady, who profiled Haggard for Charisma magazine in 1993, said he was so taken by the man that he seriously considered moving from Florida to Colorado just to work alongside him. By 2003, Haggard was elected president of the National Association of Evangelicals, an organization representing 30 million Christians across 45,000 churches. Harper's Magazine wrote that no pastor in America held more sway over the political direction of evangelicalism than Pastor Ted. Every Monday morning, Haggard joined a conference call with White House staffers, and sometimes with President George W. Bush directly. He lobbied Congress on Supreme Court nominees. He counseled foreign dignitaries. Time magazine named him one of the 25 most influential evangelicals in the country. He sat in the Oval Office with Bush and argued against steel tariffs, and a month later, the White House dropped them. During the 2004 election, Haggard championed amending the United States Constitution to define marriage exclusively as a union between one man and one woman. He preached against homosexuality with such force that in the 2006 Oscar-nominated documentary Jesus Camp, he told his congregation of thousands that they did not need to debate what they should think about homosexual activity because it was written in the Bible. Then he looked directly into the camera, grinned, and said, "I think I know what you did last night. If you send me $1,000, I won't tell your wife." That joke hits very differently now, because at the exact same time Ted Haggard was delivering those sermons and shaping national policy from the West Wing, a man in Denver named Mike Jones was watching television and slowly realizing that the client he had known for 3 years only as Art was actually the most powerful evangelical leader in the country. The client called Art. Mike Jones was a 49-year-old fitness consultant and former escort living in Denver who had advertised his services on a website called rentboy.com and in local gay publications. About 3 years before the scandal broke, Jones received a phone call from a man who called himself Art and said he was from Kansas City. At first, Art always blocked his number, but over time he got careless, and Jones started noticing every call came from payphones in the 719 area code, centered on Colorado Springs. Art visited roughly once a month, paid cash, mailed payments in envelopes marked with his fake name, and left voicemails referencing methamphetamine. Jones told Newsweek that Art would snort methamphetamine before most of their encounters. About a year into the arrangement, Art asked Jones if he could help him get meth. Jones found someone who could supply the substances, but said he never personally provided them. Their relationship was purely transactional. Jones treated Art the same way he treated every other client. The moment everything changed was when Jones was watching television and recognized Art's face on screen. The man he had been seeing every month was Ted Haggard, the president of the National Association of Evangelicals, a man who spoke with the president every Monday, and a man who was actively and aggressively campaigning to ban same-sex marriage in Colorado through Amendment 43. Jones later told the Advocate that he agonized over what to do. He could have blackmailed Haggard and walked away rich. Instead, he chose to go public because the hypocrisy was eating him alive. He said it made him angry that someone was publicly preaching against same-sex marriage while privately arranging paid encounters with men. He wanted the truth out before Colorado voted on that amendment. On August 15, 2006, Jones emailed Coosa TV journalist Paula Woodward. 6 weeks of planning followed, and in early November 2006, just days before the midterm election, the story broke wide open. 72 hours of collapse. When the allegations hit, Haggard denied everything. He looked into a camera and told a Coosa reporter that he had never had a gay relationship with anybody. He said he was faithful to his wife and suggested the accusations were election year politics. Gail Haggard, his wife of nearly 30 years and the mother of his 5 children, heard about it the same way everyone else did, on the radio during her regular day. She later told Oprah Winfrey that she laughed when she first heard the claims because her husband did not drink alcohol, did not smoke, and had never used any illegal substances, even in high school. She thought the accuser obviously did not know her husband. What she did not tell the audience right away was that early in their marriage, Ted had confided to her that he struggled with homosexual thoughts. She assumed those struggles were long behind them. Within hours, the story began eating itself alive. Acting Senior Pastor Ross Parsley sent an email to church staff confirming that Haggard had confessed that some of the accusations were true. The next morning, Haggard went back on camera with a revised story. He admitted he had called Mike Jones. He admitted he had purchased, but he said he never used it. "I bought it for myself, but never used it," he said. "I was tempted, but I never used it." He also admitted receiving a massage from Jones, but denied that anything inappropriate happened. Then the voicemails dropped. Jones released recordings of a voice referencing. Haggard confirmed the voice was his. Jones told NBC, "Yesterday, he was denying he even knew me. The only reason he really came forward was he finally heard the voicemails, and it was his voice, and he has to admit it." On November 4th, New Life Church fired him. A church panel concluded that he had engaged in conduct that violated the church's moral standards. On November 5th, his confession letter was read aloud from the pulpit of the church he had built over 22 years. He called himself a deceiver and a liar. He wrote that there was a part of his life so repulsive and dark that he had been warring against it all his life. That letter was read 2 days before the midterm election. Mike Jones later estimated that 8% of evangelicals stayed home from the polls. New Life Church attendance dropped by 25% almost overnight. The damage was done, and it was not even close to being finished. The volunteer they silenced. While the entire country was processing the Mike Jones scandal, a 22-year-old volunteer inside New Life Church was watching the coverage in silence. Grant Haas had met Haggard in 2005 after being kicked out of Moody Bible Institute in Chicago because of his struggles with homosexuality. Haas dreamed of becoming a pastor, and when he told Haggard about his past, something changed immediately. Haas later told KRDO-TV, "It seemed like at that moment his eyes lit up, and his whole attitude towards me changed." Haas recalled thinking this must have been God putting a powerful evangelical leader in his path. He had no idea the attention had a far darker motive behind it. By January 2006, Haggard was sending Haas text messages that went far beyond pastoral care, asking personal and explicit questions, including about private relationships and substance use. At certain points, Haggard sent between 1,000 and 2,000 text messages per month, some describing his own private experiences and substance use while traveling. One night in Cripple Creek, a casino town west of Colorado Springs, Haggard asked Haas if they were going to be godly or bad that night. Haas said he told Haggard he just wanted a friend and a pastor. Instead, Haggard masturbated in front of him in a hotel room. On another occasion, Haas said Haggard offered him pills during a shared room. Haas said Haggard told him, "You know what, Grant? You can become a man of God, and you can have a little bit of fun on the side." After the Jones scandal broke, Haas contacted New Life Church. Senior pastor Brady Boyd later confirmed to the Associated Press that an overwhelming pool of evidence pointed to an inappropriate, consensual, intimate relationship that went on for a long period of time. The church struck a confidential settlement with Haas in 2007, paying him for counseling and college tuition. The total was $179,000. The condition was absolute silence. Boyd publicly called it compassionate assistance and insisted it was certainly not hush money. David Clohessy, national director of SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests, saw it differently. He said that while both parties were technically adults, the power imbalance was enormous. By definition, any intimate physical contact between a congregant and minister is inherently abusive and manipulative, Clohessy told the AP. Haas said the aftermath nearly killed him. He described a period of complete isolation followed by battles with alcohol and repeated mental health crises. He finally came forward publicly in January of 2009 because the church had stopped honoring the settlement payments and because Haggard's upcoming HBO documentary, The Trials of Ted Haggard, was portraying Haggard as the victim. Haas told reporters their main focus was, cover it up, don't say anything. And the moment he broke his silence, the payments stopped entirely. The cure that never was. After the initial scandal, 4 ministers spent exactly 3 weeks conducting what they called intensive counseling with Haggard. When it was over, Reverend Tim Ralph of Larkspur walked out and told the Denver Post with absolute confidence, "He is completely heterosexual." That is something he discovered. 3 weeks. That is all it took to declare a man who had been paying for an intimate relationship with a male escort for 3 years and sending thousands of inappropriate, explicit texts to a young male volunteer as completely cured. Ralph even added that if they were going to be proven wrong, somebody else would come forward quickly. He said they were more than 90 days in and nobody had appeared. Grant Haas appeared publicly less than 2 years later. Haggard signed a $200,000 severance agreement with New Life Church. The terms forced him to leave Colorado Springs, cut off all contact with church members, and undergo counseling. He moved his family to Phoenix, Arizona. Alexandra Pelosi, the daughter of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, followed him for 18 months to produce the HBO documentary. The film showed a family in exile bouncing between borrowed homes and cramped apartments, with Haggard failing at every job he attempted, including selling insurance. In the documentary, he called himself a first-class loser and admitted he had reached a very dark point in his life. He told the camera that the reason he kept his personal struggle a secret for decades was because he feared his friends would reject him, abandon him, and the church would exile and excommunicate him. And that happened and more, he said. Just 2 years after declaring himself completely heterosexual, Haggard reversed course. On Oprah, he apologized to Mike Jones and the LGBTQ+ community. In 2009, he described his orientation as complex, and in 2011 told GQ he likely would have identified as bisexual if he were younger. He also disclosed long-term struggles with explicit material, compulsive masturbation, and childhood mistreatment by one of his father's employees. He told a congregation in Morrison, Illinois, "Some of the things that were buried in the depths of the sea from when I was in the 2nd grade started to rage in my mind and in my heart." Every version of the story Ted Haggard told depended entirely on who was asking and what he thought they needed to hear. The counselors got the heterosexual declaration. Oprah got the apology. GQ got the bisexual confession. The congregation got the childhood trauma. Nobody ever got the full truth at the same time. The system that built him. Ted Haggard was not some rogue infiltrator who slipped through the cracks of evangelical Christianity. He was the system's chosen champion. 30 million people chose him. The President of the United States chose him. Time magazine chose him. The National Association of Evangelicals chose him. After his second church collapsed and the 2022 allegations surfaced, Haggard was also sued for allegedly terrorizing a former judge and accused of criminal extortion in Colorado. He denied everything. He moved his shrinking congregation into his living room and renamed it the Story House Church. Through all of it, Gail never left. She wrote a book called Why I Stayed. She told NPR she never once considered leaving Ted. She told Oprah that restoring honor to their children meant restoring honor to their father. She stood beside him at every press conference, every church launch, and every television appearance. And the cycle of scandal, denial, settlement, silence, and reinvention kept turning year after year without interruption. Mike Jones, the man who started it all, said something in a Truth Dig interview that landed harder than any sermon Ted Haggard ever delivered. He said, "The way the church deals with homosexuality is they don't deal with it. They want to brush it to the side as quickly as possible. And then, you know what we get? We get more Ted Haggards down the road." The $179,000 settlement was not compassion. It was a contract that bought silence. The 3 weeks of counseling was not treatment. It was a press release dressed up as therapy. The recorded testimonies of young men in 2019 were presented to church elders in 2020. And nothing happened. Haggard remained in the pulpit for 2 more years. Every institution that surrounded Ted Haggard, from the White House to the National Association of Evangelicals to every church board that looked the other way, handled his story with the exact same playbook. Manage the optics, control the narrative, pay when necessary, declare healing when convenient, and move forward as fast as possible. A man who advised the president on how to run the country could not be held accountable by a single church board in Colorado Springs. Tell us in the comments whether you believe Ted Haggard's story ends with personal responsibility or whether the machine that crowned him deserves just as much blame.